Hey, welcome into the Stinkin Truth Tour. Mark Schlereth here live from New York City, bringing in Scott Gulbransen from the Silver and Black podcast, Silver and Black Today. Scott, how are you, my friend? It's great to be with you. Appreciate you having me, man.
Man, it's awesome to be with you as well. We are on the cusp of another great NFL season. And man, it's been a long summer. You know, you get to this point, even though the NFL doesn't shut down anymore, Mark, there's no real off season, so to speak. But to get back on the field, to get back to football, so I know what I'm doing on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays is really great to me. So I'm really excited to talk to you and get your point of view on the Raiders, because we had you on the show on Silver and Black Today, by the way, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. You can also hear it at 105.1 KDON in Las Vegas on the radio as well. And, we talk, you're an AFC West guy. Now, Raider fans can get somewhat upset when I say I'm talking to you, and you've been on the show a couple times, because you played for the Broncos, and you know how Raider and Bronco fans don't get along too great. But that reminds me of a story I've heard you talk about before, and that is a story that revolves around the Raiders. The last time, 2002, Raiders were in the Super Bowl down in San Diego. Tell us that story, because it's a fascinating one, and I want people to hear it.
Yeah, this is for your Raider fans, and I always say this, man, and I've been very consistent on this. The NFL is a better place when the Raiders are relevant. It just is, man. Raider fans are insane. And I love, my favorite place in the world to play when I played for the Denver Broncos was in Oakland. Like, they were vicious, and they just get after you. And there was something special about that, and so I love that. I love that opportunity. And I'm working for ESPN. It's one of the first years that I worked at ESPN, and I'm covering the Super Bowl in San Diego between the Raiders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And my buddy Sean Salisbury has a charitable event out in the valley of San Diego. So he invites me to come out there, and I'm like, all right, yeah, that sounds good. So I get a cab. I go out there. This is before the invention of Uber, right? So I get out to this event. And I've got to be, it's like a Friday night, and I've got to be at the stadium doing Sports Center Saturday morning at like 4 a.m. So it's like 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'm like, all right, that's it for me, man. I am out. I got to get back down to the Gas Lamp District where we're staying, and I got to get to bed because I got to be at the stadium early in the morning. So I go out to the cab stand, or I go out to the concierge at the front of this restaurant that I'm at and ask them to hail me a cab. And they're like, yeah, it's going to be about 2.5 hours to get a cab. And I'm like, you're kidding me? And they go, no, like, there are no cabs out here. So you're going to be here for a while. And I am like, I can't even believe this. Well, I don't know what to do. And I'm just kind of standing there in shock. And all of a sudden, this big Suburban pulls up. And 5 dudes start to pile in this Suburban, and they all have Raiders jerseys on. And so I'm like, hey, man, you guys don't happen to be going down to the Gas Lamp District, do you? And they go, yeah, we're staying down there. I go, you mind if I hop in and bum a ride with you, man? The cab, it's going to take 2.5 hours to get me a cab. And they're like, yeah, no problem, hop in. So I sit in there, and it's the driver and the passenger, and then in the back row, there's 2 guys and me squeezed in. So I'm on the back passenger side window. And the dude that's sitting behind the driver in the back seat keeps peering over and looking. And I can just feel him burning a hole in the side of my face. So I'm like looking out the window. Now we're on the 405, and it is like dead stop traffic. Like, we are barely moving. And I can just feel this guy burning a hole in my cheek. He just keeps looking. And he's trying to figure it out. You can feel the wheels spinning. And I'm like, nothing to see here, blah, 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 blah. And finally, he says, I got it. And he goes, I know who you are. And so I turn and I look at him and go, you do? And he goes, I know exactly who you are. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, you're that dude on ESPN that always busts the Raiders' balls. You're that guy that played for the Broncos. You hate the Raiders. You never give us credit. You're that guy. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Now everybody in the car, because we're stopped on the 405. We are stopped, and everybody in the car is turning around looking at me. The driver, the passenger, the guy sitting right by me, and they're all going, yeah, you're that guy. You're the guy that hates the Raiders. You're the guy who never gives us any credit. And they are going after me. And I'm like, no, you guys got me all wrong. And they go, deny it. Deny that you're the guy that played for the Broncos. I go, I'm not going to deny that. I did play for the Broncos. But I said, you've got me all wrong. I don't hate the Raiders. As a matter of fact, I love the Raiders. And they're like, no, you don't. You're always dog cussing us. You're never giving us credit. You suck. You're terrible. I go, no. I love the Raiders. I go, you know why I love the Raiders? Because in my 6-year career with the Denver Broncos, I was 11-1 against your punk asses.
Oh.
And the car went silent, just dead silent. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm either going to get my ass kicked or this is going to go over really well. And lo and behold, man, the car just like blasted out in laughter, and erupted with laughter. And these dudes were the best dudes. The rest of the ride, we were in that car for like 2 hours, just flipping each other crap like dudes do, right? And it was awesome. And as a matter of fact, years later, I'm doing the Ballers, which was on HBO with my buddy The Rock, and I'm on the show, and I'm in San Francisco, and I'm sitting on the set, and we're getting done filming a scene or whatever, and I'm just kind of hanging around, and I hear from the background, stink. And finally I turn around. I'm like, hey, how's it going? He goes, Stink, come here. So I get up and I walk over, and it's like, dude, I was the dude driving the Suburban when you told us about how you beat our punk asses. I work in the financial district in San Francisco, and we ended up having a 15-minute conversation, and just was a great guy, great big-time Raiders fan. So as much as grief as I give the Raiders, man, I have a ton of respect for the organization. And like I said, hey, man, the league is a better place when the Raiders are relevant. And I think that, honestly, that what they've done here this offseason for the first time, I know you talk about it all the time on your podcast, bringing adults into the organization, but that's what I feel about the Raiders. And I feel like they are, I don't know that they're a playoff team, but I think they're going to be much improved this year.
Yeah, great story. And you know what? Covering the Raiders for 8 years, I went into, because I grew up in San Diego. So you're talking about San Diego. I grew up in San Diego around, Charger fans my whole life, as well as a Charger fan growing up. And the misconception with the Raider fans, right? There is a misconception. Don't get me wrong. When you were down there in Oakland, the Black Hole is a tough place to play in front of, but also very motivating, as I hear from other players as well. But misunderstood. They're really great. And if you can give it and take it, they love you. It doesn't matter even if they hate your team. So it's good that you shared that story. But let's move into that. You talked about the end, what you like they're doing right now. And one of the things that you always talk about is sort of that old school, no nonsense approach, getting football players on the team. So now the Raiders go out this year after last year giving Antonio Pierce basically a long tryout as head coach, which didn't work out, unfortunately. But you look at it, they bring in Pete Carroll. I mean, how can you question Pete Carroll, what he's done? John Spytek, one of the young executives in the league who really had built a name for himself down in Tampa Bay. And then you have this guy named Tom Brady. Maybe you've heard of him as a minority owner, but who is, when he can be contractually, very involved in what's going on with this franchise, at least as an advisor to Mark Davis, the majority owner. When you look at that and you assess the potential of this new leadership in that group to instill what you talk about, that fundamental, no-nonsense, hard-nosed football type organization, how do you feel about the future for the Raiders?
Well, I think they're on the right track. And I have so much respect for Pete Carroll, his football knowledge, the way he brings competition to an organization, and like the no-nonsense kind of culture that has to be developed. And I think culture is really interesting because everybody talks about, changing the culture. Everybody talks about coming in and establishing a culture, but that is not something you can establish in like, this is what we're going to do, and then you just walk away from it. It's got to be something that's preached, but got to be something that's lived every single day. And one thing I know about Pete Carroll is Pete Carroll is going to bring a culture of toughness, of competition, and that to me is one of the keys to having a great football team. I think the other thing that Pete Carroll has always wanted to do, and one of the things that I always loved about Pete, is he wants to run the football. He wants to be great and be physical because he understands that that's how you win football games. Keep it tight, run the ball, control the clock, let your defense play off of that, right? Have complementary football team, and you're going to win a lot of games. You're going to be in a lot of tight games, but you're going to win a lot of games in the fourth quarter. One thing he always preached, when I was doing a Seattle game for Fox, he always preached, and he was very proud of how many close fourth quarter games they end up winning. How many one-score games in Seattle back in those days? You can do the math or you can look it up, but I think they won more one-score games than just about any team in football. And he was very proud of that, and that was a mentality. That was based on the culture that they established and the way they established their football team. And so that's one thing I love because that stuff travels. When you play a physical style of football, when you can run the ball, that is a litmus test for winning championships and winning in this day and age of football. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, we've seen this resurgence of the run game. And, it's always kind of cyclical, the NFL is. But why have we seen that? Well, one of the reasons is the league went into this kind of passing game mode, right? We want to throw the ball at all costs. We want to throw it 65 to 70% of the time. What was the defense's reaction to that? Let's play little. Let's get small. Let's have linebackers that weigh 215 to 220 pounds. Let's be able to run like the wind. Let's constantly match teams, even if they're in base, in nickel and in dime. Right? Nickel being obviously 5 defensive backs, dime being 6 defensive backs. Let's go ahead and match teams in that fashion and just outrun teams. Well, when I played in Denver, we used to have this rule. You'll love this. Scott, it was this. If it comes between the little guy and the big guy, hit the little guy, right? Punch the little guy in the mouth. If a fight breaks out, go after the little guy. And that's kind of the philosophy in today's game. I think offensive football has looked at the way defense has responded to the passing game and going, why are we trying to match athlete for athlete when we've got a bunch of small guys out there? Let's get big and let's just bludgeon these dudes. Let's just get after these guys. And now all of a sudden you see teams like I've been watching the NFL and I've been watching a bunch of preseason. I have seen more fullbacks than I can remember seeing in recent years. Guys like Seattle went and got this guy, Ooch, that played against you guys. I went and watched and studied the film, and he's just absolutely dispensing justice, shortening necks. And I'm like, that's what you need. And you don't do it every play, obviously, but that's what you need. Then I watch Baltimore with their multiple fullback system, and they're just bludgeoning teams. And I'm looking at that going, that is old school football. And I think that's what Pete Carroll will bring to the Raiders.
Yeah, it's very interesting, too, in the AFC West, Mark. You see what Jim Harbaugh is doing because obviously he knows that that's his brand of football as well, and what the Chargers have done at running back this year, and of course what the Broncos are attempting to do, and the Chiefs still trying to figure it out as well. So yeah, great stuff. But to run the ball effectively, like you're talking about, and I think we're at the precipice of another great running back generation. I really do think that's happening within the league. But you spent 12 years in the offensive line yourself. So the Raiders, they get Geno Smith, some consistency at quarterback, which is going to help them. But then also they go out, number 6 overall, they get Ashton Genty, somebody that I was screaming for early on because the Raiders had the worst rushing offense in the league last year. They could not run the ball. So now you look at the offensive line. They signed Colton Miller to that extension. He deserves it. He's been a very, very good player in this league despite some injuries, so they take care of him there. Now, Jackson Powers-Johnson, they draft him out of Oregon last year, plays center for the Raiders. He tells the public, hey, I'm going to be the center. Pete Carroll had other thoughts. Move him to right guard, and then you have Jordan Meredith come in at center, Dylan Parham at left guard, a second-year player. You look at that Raider offensive line, to me, going into camp, one of the big questions was, Can they do it? Because they have other tools on offense. They have Brock Bowers. They have Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, right? They have all these weapons, if you will. But if you can't protect the quarterback, if you can't keep that pocket, what's going to happen? How do you feel about this offensive line? A lot of Raider fans were really having heartburn over the Jackson Powers Johnson move. But as I said, Pete Carroll knows what he's doing. He's been around a little bit, and that offensive line's got to gel. How do you think they're going to do? Do they have the offensive line to where that offense can be very high performing in that AFC West?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And watching them early against the Seahawks, I looked at it and it didn't look good, right? And I got a couple of buddies of mine texting me like, oh, they were awful up front. So I get into the coach's film because I don't really watch the television broadcast. I watch film. I like to study film. I like to look at it. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. Now they ran a ton of belly, which is just like weak inside zone, right? To the weak side away from the tight end. And I thought most of the mistakes that I watched in that first preseason game were technical mistakes. They were technique mistakes based on blocking schemes, knowing how you're going to get to the second level, the way you're going to block things. I thought that was what really derailed their running game. I didn't think it was the fact that the guys couldn't play. I just thought from a coaching standpoint, they weren't coached up very well on that particular kind of scheme. And then I thought it was much better in the second game. And I go back and look at this stuff because I know you and I are going to get together, Scott. So I wanted to look at exactly kind of what I saw. I think one of the things that you look at the center position is saying, hey, man, we want our best. And I love this about Pete Carroll. I want my best 5 to play. So if my 5th best offensive player is the backup center, my 5th best offensive lineman is the backup center, and it makes us a stronger unit to move our center to guard, then that's what we're going to do because that gives us the best chance to be a solid group up front. The other thing it does for you, when you have 2 guys that play center, we always talk about the fact that the center sets the protections or sets the calls early, but everybody has to mimic it and everybody has to be responsible in that process of calling plays. So oftentimes if I'm playing left guard and the center is moving to the right and he's protecting to the right, well, the left tackle and I are on an island. So now I'm the one communicating with the left tackle of what we're going to do because that center is turning the opposite way. So everybody in that system has to be able to communicate. I always joke around that we are a secret mushroom society. Nobody knows what the hell we're doing except us. Even the head coach doesn't know oftentimes what we're doing or the way we're blocking things. So we have to be in charge of that, what's going on up front. We have to be just dialed into protections, into fronts, how we want to get things done, how we can cheat protections, how we can do all that stuff, and the way we're going to actually block things. So you want your best 5 and you want communicators on that line of scrimmage as much as you can have across the board because that becomes incredibly important. And Geno Smith is a guy that I love. He's one of the few guys that came in and was given an opportunity, really failed early and came back and played well. You guys have had that experience in the past with a guy named Rich Gannon. And I played with Rich Gannon in Washington. When Rich Gannon will tell you flat out, he'd come on this show and say, I sucked as a quarterback back then. And I can confirm he wasn't very good at that time. But Rich Gannon, what he did throughout his career and becoming an MVP for the Raiders, it was absolutely remarkable to see his growth. And we've seen that with Sam Darnold. We've seen that with Baker Mayfield. We've seen that with Geno Smith. So I'm a big Geno Smith fan. I know that Pete Carroll, I've had many conversations with Pete Carroll about Geno Smith. Pete Carroll loves Geno Smith, loves the unselfishness, the understanding of the game, the completion percentage. And one thing about Geno that he probably doesn't get credit for, dude has a hose. That dude can absolutely spin it. And so, you couple that with a guy like Ashton Jeanty. And listen, this is a double whammy for me, because of my initial hatred for the Raiders. And then Jeanty comes from Boise State. So I wanted to hate him too. Like I went through during my pre-draft analysis and I got all the coaches tape on the college games as well. And so I went in and watched Genty and I wanted to hate his guts. I wanted to say, hey man, he's small, and blah, blah, blah. That dude is a football playing Jesse. Man, that dude can play. And his ability to be physical, contact balance. But one of the things that just impressed me the most, when you are good at running the ball, a lot of it has to do with the understanding of the running back, understanding blocking schemes, understanding fronts. So let's say we get in, to a wide zone situation, and we have a kind of a 25 front, which would put a nose guard on like a 1 technique on the front side of the run, right? And you've got a defensive end as a 5, head up, or just outside shade, not head up, outside shade of the offensive tackle. And then your Sam linebackers on the line of scrimmage, outside shade of the tight end. Well, what as a running back is I press that, the odds are I'm not getting outside of that because that Sam linebacker's responsibility is to set an edge and force the ball back inside. So you still have to hit your entry point, but you have to have the knowledge to say, what is the most likely scenario to happen? That guy's going to be coached to hold that edge. And so the natural scenario is I want to get guys running, right? I want to get them moving to that outside so I can set up my cutback lane because that's the most likely thing that will transpire. So guys that are smart, and when you watch Genty, does he have great contact balance? Yes. Can he break tackles? Yes. Can he run over people like he did in San Francisco? You're damn right he can. But the thing that impressed me most of all watching him in college was the way he set up blocks, the way he executed, and the way he helped his offensive line get to the second level and to block guys. And I remember this play because I put it down in my draft process. So he's running outside zone. He's got an outside C-gap lane, right? And he hugs. I think maybe it was power. I don't remember. It was maybe power with a puller, right? And they secure that edge. And he hugged that double team like he was so tight off the ass of the tackle and the tight end on that. And there's just wide open space outside of him. But he just hugs it so tight. Why? Because he knew the unblocked guy was the corner screaming off the edge. And he hugged it so tight that when that corner came flying in there, he created room for himself not to get tackled. If he's a yard outside of that double team, he gets tackled by that corner. But he hugged it so tight that he's breaking the arm tackles of the defensive end that's reaching out, with his hand trying to grab him. He just breaks right through that. But he eliminates that corner as a threat to tackle him. And then he cut back behind his safety and took it about 70 yards or 60 yards or whatever. He got run out of bounds before he scored. But I'm like, that to me is the difference between a really like a back who understands what he's doing versus a back who just runs the daylight. And that was the difference between, hey, listen, he's still gotten 7 yards or 8 yards. And you'd be gone, wow, what a great run. This guy is awesome. But he turned that 7 or 8 yards into 67 or 68 yards, right? And that's the difference between a guy who understands the scheme and understands the fronts versus a guy who just runs off of instinct.
Yeah, smart football player. And I'll tell you, one of the things, as doing the draft as you did, everybody talked about his size, right? But then you look at LaDainian Tomlinson and some of those guys who had similar traits. I'm not comparing him to LaDainian Tomlinson because the kid's got a long way to go before he reaches that kind of level, but he's kind of got that makeup. And your former teammate, Rich Gannon, mentioned on the broadcast the other night that because of his size coming from behind that line, sometimes those linebackers in the back can't pick him up at first, and suddenly he hits that jet. Talk a little bit about that too, and is that a real thing? Because I don't think people, if you've never been on a football field with guys that big, you might not understand just how quick that running back can find that hole if he can't be seen. Yeah,
he's like, I kind of compared him a little bit to Mo Jones-Drew back in the day, kind of a like a bowling ball of butcher knives, just rolling through there. But there were a couple of runs I remember him having against Oregon where he got behind line of scrimmage and dudes are peeking, trying to find him. They're extending and they're peeking up over. And because they're peeking up over, they're getting tall and then they're getting pushed. And then he's just finding little lanes. And I thought all those things about him were great. And I don't mind shorter backs. He is stout. He's a short, stout guy that has great power. And like I said, great inside runner, contact balance, isn't afraid to lower the boom and run dudes over. He just has all those things. And one of the other things that I think is really important, Mike Tomlin said this to me a couple of years ago as I was doing a Pittsburgh game, and it just really resonated with me. I'd never heard it before, and I've stole it as my own. I'm crediting him here. I shouldn't, but I'm going to. Not every run is a smorgasbord. Sometimes you just need an appetizer. And the guys who understand that, hey, you give me 4 yards, you give me 3 yards, let me put my nose in there and make that 3-yard gain. I call them +2 runners, a 5-yard gain. That dude's a +2 runner. So when it's not clean to the second level, that's all right. I'm going to be physical, and I'm going to get me that 3-yard gain that turns into a 5-yard gain, or that 2-yard gain that turns into a 4.5-yard gain. I'm getting that for our offense so we can stay on schedule. And I know that the big run will happen if I'm patient with the little run, because little runs become big runs. And I watched him do that at Boise State. Again, this is way too much love for Boise State, way too much love. My Idaho roots usually does not allow me to go this deep into Boise State stuff. But I'm just really impressed with him. I think he's going to be great.
Well, I'm there with you on Boise State because I'm a UNLV alumni. So, you know what happened last year, and it's going to be a tough one this year. So we'll see how it goes. The last question I want to ask you about, and thanks for being so generous with your time today, man, is the fact that, you talk about so much physically dominant defenses, right? You look at Philadelphia, you look at Baltimore, teams like that who are constantly in the mix because they have that physically dominant defense. A lot of question marks on this Raiders defense. Of course, we saw the Christian Wilkins, that weird situation and the injury. They cut him loose, and they seem to do better in game 2 of the preseason against the run. Tyree Wilson, of course, number 7 pick overall a couple years ago. Everybody's still waiting for him. We talked about it on this show, saying that we wouldn't be surprised if he was playing hybrid inside and outside, and that's what we saw the other night. So he seems to be doing a little bit better. But they got major questions, Mark, at linebacker, where to me, they appear extremely slow, and they have the inability to kind of cut off those edges. And then in the defensive backfield, still struggling with cornerbacks there as well. Of course, they brought in some guys to hopefully shore that up. But cornerback safety is still an issue. When you look at that Raiders defense, I very easily could see this Raiders team go out, light it up on offense, much like you saw with Cincinnati last year, right? Where you're scoring 30 points and you're losing games. How much work does that defense need to do? And what does Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll need to do to at least minimize what the weaknesses are so that they can stay competitive on that side of the ball?
Yeah, well, one thing about Pete, and he'll tell you, and he's told me this before, just understand that, I know what I'm looking for from defensive backs, and they may not be what everybody else is looking for, but he's got a type, right? Pete Carroll's got a type in the defensive backfield. So he's really, really good at that. I think Patrick Graham is one of those guys that makes it really difficult on an offense with all being multiple and all the different things we do, but really does a great job of teaching that to make it simple for the defensive players. It's really hard on an offense because there's so many different ways. It's like where in the world was Waldo, right? Who's the flat defender on this? In one minute it's the linebacker, the next minute it's the corner, the next minute it's the safety and a sky rotation, the next minute it's the defensive end. And he does a great job of coaching it so everybody on that defense is completely dialed in, but it's really hard to read as an offensive player. So I've always liked the way Patrick Graham holds all that stuff accountable. I think the biggest thing, though, and I talked about this with Cincinnati, and I'm doing this show out here on FS1 last year, Breakfast Bowl, and I said this, and the two guys that I work with thought I was crazy. And they looked at me like, like you don't know what you're talking about. And I go, you guys don't understand football. And one of the things I said about Cincinnati, their offensive coordinator came out this offseason and said, hey, we're just going to have to outscore people. Well, how'd that work for you last year? Because you were able to do that. And you know what? You just kept losing games. So to me, it's not necessarily about hanging 30. It's how you hang 30 or how you hang 27. It's about controlling the tempo of the game. What's the old saying? You pass to score, but you run to win. You've got to run the ball. You have got to take some pressure off the defense. You have got to eliminate the number of possessions the defense has to play defense. And my good buddy Herm Edwards used to say it all the time. A defensive player, like he did this long study back in Tampa Bay when he was a defensive coach for Tony Dungy back in the day. And he said, after 62 to 65 plays, your defense is spent. Like the number of yards per play after about 62 goes up exponentially. I mean, exponentially. You go from giving up 4 or 5 yards per play to giving up 12 yards or 15 yards per play because your defense is worn out. So the complementary nature of what you're doing, one of the reasons Pete Carroll is there, he knows that this defense has still got some progression to make as far as turning over that roster and getting the right players there. So how are we going to still be competitive? Why we still have to revamp our linebacking core and doing all that stuff is running the football, possessing the football, taking care of the football, not turning it over. All those things lead to, instead of making your defense play 12 or 13 possessions, can we get it down to 10 or 9 or 8 possessions that they have to play? Because then we're going to be in every single ball game. And that really becomes, to me, kind of the mindset. And then it's about turning over the roster and finding guys. Interestingly enough, I live now in Denver. I'm in New York right now, but I still live in Denver. And just talking to the Broncos, being at training camp practices for the last, 3 weeks, talking to them about getting rid of fan favorites, about moving on from fan favorites, about how they want to build their roster, how they want guys that are committed to playing football. Like, you guys got one of the greatest players in the National Football League, bar none, in Max Crosby. Smart, physical, unrelenting effort. Like, you want to keep as many of those guys. Probably doesn't pass the jump over boxes tests, right? Probably isn't the best bench presser in the world, but man, great football player that I have nothing but the utmost respect for. So you want to create a situation where you have as many of those guys as possible, and you're turning over that roster, finding the right people to play, finding the right type of guys, creating the right atmosphere. And so much of that's what winning football and winning culture is all about. We get so enamored with athletes. And one of the things I always say is football is really hard for athletes. It's easy for football players. So let's find as many football players as possible. And that may take a year or two. But you look at I look at where Denver is right now, and the decisions that they made, tough decisions. It was like, oh, they're going to get Russell Wilson and have all that dead cap money. What are we going to do? Who gives a crap, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Dead cap, or dead man walking. Like, who gives a rip? What we have to get is the right people, even if we have to eat money. We've got to get the right people within our organization. And you look at where they are now, the confidence that they have. They went to the playoffs with the rookie last year. This football team is completely different. When you watch them walk onto the field, they walk with a different pace, with a different swagger. Like, they have a belief in Denver right now that they can win this division. And that's where Seattle did a great job all those years, where Pete Carroll did a great job all those years in Seattle. And what Pete Carroll's helping to bring, hopefully that mindset that he created in Seattle, he's hoping to bring that to Las Vegas. And I don't have any doubts that he will. It may not be completely this year, but I think you're going to see a much better organization this year than you've seen in the last decade.
Yeah, our listeners got mad at us when we thought our projection early on is 7 or 8 wins. Now, you won 4 games last year. If you double your wins in one season, that's pretty good progress, right? Yeah. It's not where you want to be, but certainly it gets you closer to where you want to be. And so I'm with you there. I think realistically, especially in the division, and look at the 4 coaches in the division. It's crazy when you look at those 4 guys and 686 wins, whatever it is, it's insane. But it's great. And I certainly appreciate you giving us your insight and letting us be part of the Stinkin Truth podcast and you being part of Silver and Black today. And we'll get you on Broncos week if we can fit you in so that you can be a little more animated with your Raider stuff. It'll be fun, and we can talk about that going into the first game.
Yeah, it's always good. That's how guys know they like each other, right? When they talk smack about each other and are just mean to one another, like that's like we're connected. That's why I connect so well with Raider fans. Like I've got beef with about 6, 7, 8 different fan bases. And I love it, right? I love it. Like Twitter to me is an extension of the locker room. You walk in to my Twitter feed, you better have your nuts dropped because nothing is off limits on my feed. Let's roll because it's just like being in a locker room to me. So don't come into my Twitter feed and think I play with kid gloves because I don't. I'll come after you just like I would in a locker room. It's kind of that whole locker room mentality was always kill or be killed. Come in, guns a-blazing. And so that's what I hope to do. So I look forward during Raiders week. I look forward to being on the podcast with you. And then after the game, maybe there better be some bragging rights. Maybe we do the podcast again after the game and at least a segment and have an opportunity to bust balls. Because one thing about me, this is a rule I live by from a competition standpoint. I am a gracious loser, but when it comes to winning, I'm an absolute dick. And I'll let you know about it. All right. I will let you know about it. So
I love it. No getting caught in the feelings.
You guys will not hear the end of it from me.
No getting caught in the feelings, man. You got to get, as I said, you got to give it and take it. My Thursday night cigar guys group I smoke cigars with, the stuff, if people could hear what we talk about and say to each other, we'd all be in a lot of trouble. But anyway, Stink, man, I appreciate the time. Thanks for having me on and thanks for being on.
You are absolutely welcome, Scott. I appreciate it. For Silver and Black today, I am Stink from the Stinkin Truth podcast. Thank you guys so much for making us a part of your day. Make sure you subscribe to both podcasts because you're only going to get this great content right here. Scott, we'll talk to you during Raiders Broncos week, my friend.
Sounds good, buddy. We'll take care and have a good broadcast. You're starting off the season, and I know you do really well, so thanks for it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.